Yeah, walked up by the our Human Rights Monument, also where we have the little Malebin for the Joy of Canada and for All Saints on certain days, and seeing how the growth is, what has to be done to clean it up for the spring and before we have any of the services. We'll go on talking about this question of rational, so-called rationalism versus religion, or science versus religion. And I'm going to hand the camera over to Deacon Philip so you can sort of see me talking once in a while, a little. The question that we had raised is that sometimes people want to make a conflict between rational thinking and religion, as if all science was just a system of rational thinking. But as we mentioned before, the greatest breakthroughs in science come as an epiphany. They don't come as a process of just sitting down and doing a lot of rational thinking. Of course, after, no, it just went off. Oh no, it's on, it's okay. It's wrong to think, though, that all of a sudden a person has this insight and that's the end of it. Their peers are going to research this, and what you have to do with a scientific hypothesis or idea, you have to approach it by trying to prove it wrong, not by trying to prove it right, and trying to see all of its weaknesses and its flaws. So you don't start saying, well, I've got this idea and I'm going to try to prove it's right because it's my idea and I think it's brilliant. First of all, you publish the idea, other scientists get a hold of it and they start to criticize it, and you yourself, meanwhile, start to prove it wrong, to see if you can find the flaws in it. And this is really the way science is done, by thinking outside the box, by not being too rational, by having some kind of faith, and this epiphany comes along, and we would really call it theoria. Now, from an Orthodox Christian point of view, our theology, our dogma, with the Holy Fathers developed through theoria, but in their case, theoria indicates a kind of vision, something inspired by the Holy Spirit. Now, this is about things that are really dogmatic in the church, not some kinds of peripheral facts that can change with time that the Holy Fathers learned from the secular world around them, such as scientific ideas or descriptions of the cosmos or the age of the earth. And these things very often came from, not from revelation, but from surmise and from people like, the great geography, Ptolemy, and other sciences of the era and philosophies of the era. But when the Holy Fathers had this theoria, this vision, which you'd have to describe as a vision that comes as a result of contemplation, and the vision comes as a theophany, and it reveals something about the faith that's quite essential. Now, when science does the same thing, a scientist has always information and ideas going on. If he's too rational, he never makes a clear breakthrough in science. He can focus on developing some vaccine, as we mentioned before, genetically modified organisms, or something like this, or studying the weather patterns and global warming, that sort of thing, come from collecting a lot of data. But the whole concept, the theory of relativity, and the whole opening up of quantum mechanics, these things came to the scientists by a type of theoria, when they were thinking outside of pure rational thought, outside of rationalism. Now, what this means to us is the idea that because you cannot come up with rational arguments about the faith, that you cannot come up with a scientific, say, definition of God, or what the people call a scientific proof of God. Well, it's the same way in science. How did Einstein come upon the theory of relativity? He had all kinds of inspiration and ideas and things, but hiking in the mountains one day in Switzerland, this is where he had a kind of theophany that came to him about this whole idea came together for him. And so when we talk about, say, a conflict between rational science and religion, in a way it doesn't make any sense, because we're dealing with theophanies, with revelation, with epiphanies. And this epiphany that comes, we use the word epiphany and theophany both, but epiphany is sort of a sudden revelation, theophany is a revelation of God. But the epiphany can come in science as well. And hyper-rationalism, or being overly rational, can keep people from these deep insights into the truth and into reality. Consequently, in our theology, in the teachings and revelation of the church, now we're talking about epiphanies, things that come to people who are not boxed in by, say, Aristotelian rationalism or absolutely rational thought. And this is why there's something very similar in religion and science, and in both of them, not being overly rational is the area where people make the greatest and most profound discoveries about reality. And so often, as quantum mechanics proves, reality is counterintuitive. We approach so many things from intuition, and intuition is a kind of faith. But in science, in quantum mechanics, everything becomes more strange the more we know about it, more irrational, and less completely neatly packaged and ordered. And this also gives us a little bit of insight into the way our Orthodox theology works. People who can think outside the box, can be open to these epiphanies, and can realize that the truth is not, and reality are not really so neatly packaged, that very often reality is counterintuitive. And of course, when we think about ordinary human thought, we realize that the kingdom of heaven, God, and the love and compassion of God are in a way counterintuitive also. Counterintuitive, but very profoundly insights into the ultimate realities, just as quantum mechanics and other things are counterintuitive, and yet give us these powerful insights into the reality of the universe. Our theology works in a very similar way. So let's not even allow the idea that rational thought counters religion, because rational thought very often keeps people from making the greatest and most profound discoveries. And it's those people who can think beyond that and outside that who make these great discoveries of what reality really consists in. And faith is the same kind of thought. It's outside the box of what we think is the rational world. And truth and reality are not nearly so neatly packaged as people who do statistics would like to think. So the faith itself, the knowledge of God, the understanding of God, which come to us by epiphanies, and which is understood very much when we quiet down the desire for perfectly rational thought. Because perfectly rational thought is like a railway track. The train goes on the track, but it can't go anywhere else. It can't go and open up to some new vista, some new venue, some new discovery or idea. It just has to stay right on those tracks. And it doesn't come to anything new. It doesn't come to any new knowledge. It doesn't come to any deeper understandings or anything. So we want to get off the tracks of the so-called absolutely rational thought, of sort of Aristotelian rationalism and its descendants, and open our hearts and our minds to something that is much greater, much deeper, much more profound. And like quantum mechanics, like the theory of relativity, which of course has been quite clearly proved, and yet it was an astonishing breakthrough that had a lot of scientists in doubt at the time, and it would never have been arrived at had Einstein or had the early fathers of quantum mechanics, Boltzmann and Planck and all these other people, had they been thinking in purely rational ways. They would never have discovered this great sea of reality which had before been hidden to mankind. So this is kind of the other part of the message I want to give is the second part of this heart-to-heart talk. Well, thank you and God bless you, and thanks for joining us. And since the rain is beginning, I think Father Deacon Philip and I should probably get back to the building before we get drenched.